7 Deadly Sins of a Therapist. Psychotherapists hold a sacred place in the world of mental health, and they play a large part in helping those who need it. However, a lot of times therapists make mistakes that can have a bad impact on their patients' experience. In this video, we're giving you a roundup of 7 deadly sins of a therapist. Welcome to our YouTube channel. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon for notifications. Let's begin. Number 7. Being too rigid with boundaries. Therapists have certain boundaries and rules with their clients to make sure their relationship remains healthy and professional. These boundaries include things like no sexual or romantic relationship between the therapist and client, and not having a client's close person as another client. However, sometimes therapists become too rigid with these boundaries, and it makes their relationship very transaction-based. For example, if the patient is dealing with extremely depressing thoughts and the therapist refuses or ignores to talk outside of the session hours just to maintain the boundary, developing a close friendship with the client can be tricky, but it is actually healthy to help and support a bit beyond the therapy room. Number 6. Validating too much. Humans tend to like people who agree with them, and it feels nice when someone accepts and agrees to whatever you say. A lot of people don't have friends or family members that accept them, and so it's very therapeutic when someone agrees with them and validates their feelings. However, over-validating can be dangerous. As a therapist, you don't have access to the other side of the story, and validating your patient all the time can sometimes cause trouble. This is especially applicable to situations where the patient is talking about things someone else said. The therapist hasn't witnessed the actual event and so cannot tell if the client is quoting the other person correctly. In such situations, the therapist should not intervene and just listen to the client. We all have our biases and opinions, and so does the client. Over-validating a client or patient can stop them from accepting their human mistakes and errors and make them feel too virtuous. Therapy is not just a place for constant validation, but also a place for self-reflection and growth. So a therapist's job is also to question the client so they can explore their position further. Number 5. Forgetting the session is about the client, not the therapist. This mistake sounds very unrealistic. How can therapists start talking about themselves when the session is for the client? But this is also a common mistake psychotherapists often make, especially those who are less experienced in this field. Instead of giving the space to the client, therapists can sometimes start sharing their own stories and experiences. This doesn't always have to come from a bad place. As humans, we ought to share our experiences and opinions when we hear a story. However, in a therapy session, the conversation isn't between friends, but between a professional therapist and a client. And the first rule is to provide a safe space for the client to open up about themselves. Therapists sharing their own stories not only takes away the time reserved for the client to talk, but also makes the client feel that the session isn't solely for them. Talking about their personal stories can also shift the therapist's attention from the client to themselves. This can cause the therapist to lose focus on diagnosing or providing the needed support to the client. Number 4. Giving in to patients' projection. Sometimes patients ask questions that are difficult to answer. It's hard to discern whether to be honest or to tell them a lie to make them feel better. For example, a patient asks, "Am I a bad person for not loving my mother?" There's no correct answer for this. As a caring therapist, you're tempted to say, "No, you aren't a bad person." But the patient might believe you because the framing of the question shows that they are already feeling bad for not loving their mother. They may think that you're only telling them to make them feel better. In situations like these, the biggest mistake a therapist can make is to answer that question. The best way is to smartly steer the conversation back towards the patient and their feelings, and explore what makes them ask this question in the first place. A good therapist would keep the focus on the patient's feelings instead of giving their own judgment. Number 3. Not giving the client enough time to figure it out themselves. Therapists' work revolves around figuring out people's mental illnesses and issues. Sometimes, the symptoms are very clear, and all the signs show that the patient has this particular issue. Or the patient goes through mistreatment by a close person, but doesn't identify it as mistreatment. In the beginning, a lot of patients are in denial of their symptoms or issues. As a therapist, it's very tempting just to tell the client you have this issue and you're trying to deny it. However, this can turn out to be a big mistake and not help the client at all. This is because the client can get defensive and deny the thing even more. For instance, a person is sexually assaulted by a close friend. However, as the friend is too close to them, it's very hard for them to believe that they sexually assaulted them. Telling them that it was sexual assault before the client has named it can cause them to get defensive. The best way is to give the patient some time to process their emotions and feelings. Often, after some thinking, people get to the correct conclusion themselves. So it's important to give them some time to figure it out and accept it. However, if the patient is going around in circles and not understanding the main issue, the therapist can help them identify it. Number 2. Hesitant towards medication. Psychotherapists are not medical doctors, and they cannot prescribe medication. However, as they spend a lot of time with their patients, they can sense if the patient needs more than just therapy. If they feel the need, they should be able to guide their clients towards a good psychiatrist in their town. However, unfortunately, some psychotherapists are very hesitant towards advising their clients to visit a psychiatrist. They refuse to accept that in many cases, psychosocial therapy is just not enough for patients, and medication is crucial for them to get better. Number 1. Zoning out in the session. Zoning out during a session is definitely the worst blunders a therapist can ever make. A client might be telling them about the first time they realized they were gay, but the therapist didn't listen because they were too sleepy or zoned out thinking about something else. This usually happens when therapists take too many clients and are not well rested. This is extremely unprofessional and irresponsible behavior. Therapists should keep in mind that it takes a lot of courage for their clients to open up about themselves. For a client finding out that their therapist wasn't even listening to them when they talked about an important event in their life can make them feel very shitty. This can even lead to therapists forgetting or confusing the names of people who are an important part of their client's life. For instance, forgetting or saying the wrong name of the client's mother. This can even cause trust issues between the client and the therapist. If you're a therapist, please make sure you get enough sleep and rest so you can give your 100% attention to the client. That's a wrap for 7 Deadly Sins of a Therapist. Have you ever had a bad experience with a therapist? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Check the description link below for more recommended useful resources and materials. See you in the next one.